For nearly 70 years, the colony world of Vera Prime had known nothing except peace. Orbiting a quiet yellow star near the outer reaches of civilized space, the planet was never considered important by the major powers of the galaxy. It possessed no rare minerals, no ancient artifacts, and no strategic military value. Vera Prime survived because it fed people. Endless fields stretched across its continents, producing food shipments that supplied dozens of nearby systems. Cargo vessels arrived daily, loaded their holds, and departed for distant worlds. Life moved slowly, predictably, and safely. The colony's population reflected the diversity of the wider galaxy. Farmers, engineers, traders, and researchers from dozens of species lived side by side. Generations had grown up without witnessing war firsthand. Children learned about battles from history archives. Defense shelters stood unused. Emergency drills felt like outdated traditions rather than necessities. Everything changed in a single day. The first warning arrived from a cargo vessel approaching the system. Its captain transmitted a fragmented distress signal before communication abruptly ended. Long-range sensors soon revealed dozens of unidentified warships emerging from deep space. Within hours, the peaceful colony found itself staring at an invasion fleet unlike anything its citizens had ever imagined. No demands were issued. No negotiations were offered. The enemy simply advanced. Planetary leaders attempted immediate contact with neighboring systems. Messages were dispatched in every direction, requesting clarification, assistance, or intervention. None of the responses provided hope. Most governments declared neutrality. Some claimed the conflict did not concern them. Others quietly informed Vera Prime that they lacked the military strength to challenge the invading force. The colony stood alone. The attackers wasted no time. Orbital defense platforms that had never fired a shot in anger were destroyed within minutes. Communications satellites vanished in flashes of light. Civilian traffic attempting to flee the system was intercepted before reaching jump distance. Spaceports across the planet became targets. Explosions lit the atmosphere as landing facilities, cargo hubs, and transportation networks were systematically eliminated. Panic spread faster than official announcements. Crowds gathered around emergency information centers. Families searched desperately for missing relatives. News networks broadcast continuous updates, but each report carried worse information than the last. The enemy fleet had established a complete blockade. No vessel could leave. No vessel could enter. The realization settled across the population with crushing weight. Help was not coming quickly, if help came at all. Despite the growing fear, colonial authorities refused to surrender immediately. Every functioning transmitter was redirected toward sending distress calls. Engineers worked around the clock repairing damaged communication arrays. Backup systems were activated. Old emergency beacons, some untouched for decades, were brought online and pointed toward every known inhabited system. Thousands of messages poured into space. Most received no reply. Days passed. Then weeks. The blockade tightened further. Food supplies remained stable at first, but shortages soon appeared. Medical facilities began conserving resources. Non-essential power consumption was restricted. Ration programs expanded across every major settlement. Citizens accepted the measures without protest because everyone understood the reality facing them. The colony was preparing for a siege. Military analysts studying enemy movements reached a grim conclusion. The invaders were not interested in occupation yet. They were positioning themselves for something larger. Additional warships arrived almost daily. Massive formations assembled beyond the outer orbital zones. Weapon platforms were deployed. Supply carriers established logistical networks. The attackers were preparing for final operation. Whatever happened next would determine the fate of the entire world. Inside government bunkers, emergency councils met continuously. Evacuation plans were discussed despite there being nowhere to evacuate. Surrender terms were debated despite no terms being offered. Every option led to the same conclusion. Vera Prime lacked the means to resist a full-scale assault. As hope slowly faded, ordinary citizens focused on what mattered most. Parents spent extra time with their children. Friends gathered for meals despite shrinking portions. Communities supported one another in ways that statistics and reports could never measure. Fear remained everywhere, but so did determination. Then, during what appeared to be another routine sensor sweep, technicians monitoring the outer system detected something unusual. A faint energy fluctuation. The reading appeared for less than a second before disappearing completely. Operators assumed it was interference caused by the blockade. Similar anomalies had occurred before. The report was logged and largely ignored. Hours later, the phenomenon appeared again, this time slightly closer. Still, nobody paid much attention. After all, Vera Prime had already accepted a painful truth. The galaxy had heard their cries for help, and the galaxy had remained silent. 3 days after the second anomaly appeared, the situation around Vera Prime reached its breaking point. The invading fleet had completed its preparations. Hundreds of warships occupied strategic positions throughout the system. Orbital bombardment coordinates were finalized. Ground assault divisions waited aboard transport carriers. Every indication suggested the enemy intended to begin its final operation within hours. The colony's leadership knew it. The civilians knew it. Even the attackers behaved with the confidence of a force that had already won. Then the sensor arrays detected the anomaly again. Unlike previous readings, this one could not be dismissed. A massive energy spike erupted beyond the system's outer boundary before vanishing almost instantly. The signal lasted less than 2 seconds, yet every long-range sensor platform recorded it simultaneously. Technicians immediately launched verification procedures, expecting equipment failure. No failure was found. The reading was real. What made it unsettling was the object's speed. According to the data, something enormous was moving through deep space at a velocity that exceeded conventional expectations. The trajectory pointed directly toward Vera Prime. Calculations were repeated dozens of times because the numbers made no sense. No known military vessel could sustain such speed for such distance. When reports reached the enemy command fleet, senior officers demanded answers. They received none. Additional sensor sweeps only deepened the mystery. The approaching object emitted an unusual signature that matched no registered civilization. Its energy profile fluctuated constantly, almost as if multiple propulsion systems were operating simultaneously. Identification databases returned 0 results. The unknown contact continued closing the distance. Hours later, the invaders launched reconnaissance drones toward its projected path. None returned. The first drone disappeared without transmitting a single image. The second lost communication moments after entering the target zone. The third managed to send a fragmented burst of telemetry before its signal abruptly ended. Analysts recovered only a few corrupted frames showing intense electromagnetic interference surrounding an object of extraordinary size. Concern spread through the enemy command structure. For the first time since arriving at Vera Prime, uncertainty entered their calculations. Meanwhile, another phenomenon emerged throughout the system. Communications disruptions. Military channels experienced random interference. Navigation systems reported brief errors. Targeting arrays occasionally lost synchronization for fractions of a second. Individually, the problems seemed insignificant. Together, they suggested the presence of technology operating far beyond normal parameters. An emergency conference was convened aboard the enemy flagship. Most commanders dismissed the concerns. They argued that no single vessel could threaten an armada of their size. Whatever approached the system would simply become another casualty. One officer disagreed. Commander Terrell had served longer than anyone else present. His age made him an outsider among ambitious younger leaders eager for conquest. As discussions grew louder, he studied the sensor reports in silence. Finally, he spoke. "Have any of you reviewed the old frontier records?" The room fell quiet. Several officers exchanged confused looks. Terrell enlarged the unknown signature across the tactical display. "I have seen reports like this before." A younger commander laughed openly. "Impossible. No civilization uses propulsion patterns like that." Terrell's expression remained unchanged. "One does." The amusement vanished. Even among distant regions of the galaxy, certain stories endured. Most were considered exaggerations. tales repeated so often that they evolved into legends. Legends about humanity. The younger officers immediately rejected the idea. Humans lived far from the sector. Their territory lay beyond vast stretches of explored space. The possibility of a human vessel appearing here seemed absurd. Yet, Terrell continued. He spoke of a species born on a world classified as a death world. A species that survived disasters other civilizations considered extinction-level events. A species that repeatedly ignored conventional military doctrine. More importantly, he spoke of their reputation. Humans possessed an unusual habit. They answered distress calls. Not because treaties required it. Not because resources justified it. Simply because someone needed help. Records described human rescue missions crossing impossible distances, entering active war zones, and challenging superior forces for strangers they had never met. Rational strategists considered such actions foolish. Humanity considered them necessary. As debate filled the command chamber, the mysterious contact finally reached the edge of the system. Every sensor platform locked onto it. Space itself appeared to distort. A massive rupture formed within the darkness beyond the outer planets. Energy surged across millions of kilometers. Shockwaves rolled through local space as though reality had been torn open. Then the vessel emerged, gigantic, armored, built for war. Its engines burned with enough power to overwhelm sensor networks throughout the system. Moments later, a transmission spread across every frequency available. The message contained no threats. No demands. No introduction. Only a calm, human voice. We received your distress call. For several seconds after the transmission ended, nobody moved. Across Vera Prime, citizens stared at screens in disbelief. Government officials thought they had misheard the message. Sensor operators repeatedly checked their systems to confirm what stood before them. One human warship.
One.
Against an invasion force that outnumbered it hundreds to one. Logic suggested the newcomers should immediately retreat. Any rational military commander would have recognized the impossible odds and preserved their vessel for future engagement. The human ship did neither. Instead, it accelerated. The enormous warship advanced directly toward the blockade. Enemy commanders recovered from their surprise quickly. Convinced that overwhelming numbers guaranteed victory, they ordered an immediate attack. Formation groups shifted into combat positions. Missile batteries armed. Energy, weapons charged. Hundreds of targeting solutions locked onto the approaching vessel. The first wave fired simultaneously. Streams of plasma crossed the darkness. Missile swarms surged forward. The human ship never altered course. At the last possible moment, something unusual happened. Powerful electronic pulses erupted from the vessel, spreading through nearby space. Enemy guidance systems suddenly began malfunctioning. Missiles drifted away from their targets. Several detonated harmlessly after receiving corrupted commands. Fire control networks lost synchronization. Before the invaders could adapt, the human warship struck back. Its weapons were unlike anything most observers expected. No glowing beams. No exotic superweapons. Instead, enormous kinetic projectiles launched from concealed batteries along the vessel's hull. Accelerated to incredible velocities, they crossed engagement distances in moments. The first impact shattered two enemy cruisers before defensive systems could react. Shock spread through the invasion fleet. The humans had attacked first and drawn blood immediately. Inside the human vessel, however, nobody celebrated. The crew understood the reality of their situation. Tactical displays showed enemy formations stretching across vast regions of space. Every officer knew they could not defeat such numbers through firepower alone. They would need something else. Adaptation. The trait humanity had carried from its earliest days. As additional attack waves converged, the human commanders studied enemy behavior patterns. The invaders relied heavily on centralized coordination. Individual ships performed efficiently, but only when operating within established command structures. That dependency became the target. The human vessel launched specialized drones into the battlefield. Rather than engaging directly, the machines flooded communication channels with false data. Sensor contacts appeared where none existed. Phantom fleets materialized across tactical displays. Command algorithms struggled to separate reality from deception. Enemy formations began responding to threats that did not exist. Gaps opened. Mistakes multiplied. The human commander exploited every one of them. The warship moved aggressively, striking isolated groups before repositioning elsewhere. Its maneuvers ignored conventional combat doctrine. At times, it appeared reckless. At others, completely unpredictable. Each action forced the invaders to react rather than execute their own plans. The psychological effect proved just as damaging. Military officers trained to defeat superior weapons. They struggled against opponents who refused to behave as expected. As hours passed, reports of human actions spread throughout the battlefield. Colony citizens watched in astonishment as enemy vessels were disabled, scattered, or driven from key positions. The impossible was becoming reality. Hope returned. Not because victory seemed guaranteed. Because someone had finally chosen to stand with them. The human crew fought with remarkable determination. Damage accumulated across their ship. Defensive systems absorbed repeated impacts. Repair teams worked continuously to keep critical functions operational. Yet no sign of retreat appeared. Every time the enemy concentrated forces in one location, the humans created problems somewhere else. Every attempted trap failed. Every prediction proved wrong. Slowly, the numerical advantage that had seemed unstoppable began losing its effectiveness. Commander Terrell watched developments from the enemy flagship with growing concern. The younger officers who had mocked his warnings earlier were no longer laughing. Entire formations had been disrupted. Operational schedules were collapsing. Morale throughout the fleet was declining. Worst of all, the humans appeared completely committed. They had not come to negotiate. They had not come to observe. They had come to save the colony. And they were succeeding. Desperate to regain control, enemy leadership initiated contingency protocols that had remained classified since the campaign began. Deep within the flagship, hidden systems activated for the first time. Across the battlefield, energy readings surged dramatically. Even the human sensors detected the change. The source was the flagship itself. Massive power reserves flowed into a weapon platform concealed within its structure. The device required enormous energy because it had been designed for one purpose only, destroying targets too dangerous for conventional fleets to eliminate. For the first time since entering the system, silence settled across the human command deck. Everyone understood what the readings meant. The enemy had finally revealed its strongest weapon, and it was aimed directly at the lone warship standing between Vera Prime and destruction. Continuing the story with the final section, the flagship fired. A column of concentrated energy erupted across space with enough power to alter the balance of the entire battle in a single strike. The weapon crossed the distance almost instantly and slammed into the human warship. For a moment, the vessel disappeared inside a blinding sphere of light. Throughout Vera Prime, millions watched in silence. When the energy finally dissipated, the ship was still there. Barely. Large sections of its armor had been torn away. Entire weapon arrays were gone. Multiple decks had lost pressure. Fires spread through damaged compartments. Several propulsion systems dropped offline. Sensor readings confirmed severe casualties among the crew. The enemy fleet erupted in celebration. The colony fell silent once more. Yet the human vessel continued moving. Slowly at first, then faster. Inside the damaged ship, emergency alarms echoed through shattered corridors. Medical teams treated the wounded wherever space could be found. Engineers fought to prevent cascading system failures. Every report reaching the command deck carried bad news. No reinforcement fleets were nearby. No escape route existed. No second chances remained. The captain listened to each update without interruption. When the final damage assessment arrived, one fact became impossible to ignore. The warship could not survive another direct hit from the superweapon. A younger officer finally asked the question everyone was thinking. Should we withdraw? The answer came immediately. No. Not because the captain expected survival. Not because victory was guaranteed. Because below them was an entire world that had trusted a single voice when it said help had arrived. Retreat would save the ship. It would doom the colony. The choice required no debate. Orders spread across the vessel. Remaining power reserves were redirected. Non-essential systems shut down. Every available resource was committed to one final operation. Crew members understood what was happening. Not a single objection was recorded. Some wrote final messages to families. Others returned to damaged stations despite knowing the risks. Engineers volunteered for sections exposed to dangerous radiation levels. Medical personnel remained with injured crewmates instead of seeking safer locations. Across the ship, people accepted the same reality and continued working. The mission mattered more than they did. The enemy flagship began charging its weapon for a second shot. Human analysts calculated the timing. There would be no opportunity to evade. No possibility of outgunning it. Only one option remained. The captain ordered a direct attack. Every functioning engine ignited simultaneously. The warship surged forward. Enemy commanders immediately recognized the threat and attempted interception. Dozens of vessels moved to block the approach. Missile volleys filled space. Energy batteries unleashed continuous fire. The human ship drove through all of it. Armor plate shattered. Internal systems failed. Sections of the hull broke apart under sustained bombardment. Still it advanced. The closer it came, the more chaotic the battlefield became. Remaining human weapons targeted key defensive positions surrounding the flagship. Precision strikes disabled shield generators. Electronic warfare systems flooded communication channels with interference. Enemy coordination deteriorated at the worst possible moment. Commander Terrell watched the human vessel charging directly toward his position. For the first time, he understood something many throughout the galaxy had never fully appreciated. Humanity's greatest strength was not technology. It was commitment. Once humans decided something had to be done, fear became secondary. The flagship fired again. But the shot came too late. The damaged warship crossed the final distance and unleashed everything it had left. Kinetic batteries emptied their remaining ammunition. Missile tubes launched their final payloads. Reactor reserves were pushed beyond safety limits. The combined impact shattered the flagship's defensive network. Moments later, a chain reaction erupted through its core systems. The explosion illuminated half the system. When the light faded, the flagship no longer existed. Silence followed. Then panic. Without centralized command, the invasion fleet lost cohesion. Captains who had relied on orders suddenly faced uncertainty. Formation integrity collapsed. Retreat signals spread rapidly through surviving forces. One by one, enemy vessels disengaged and fled toward deep space. The siege was over. Vera Prime had survived. Celebrations erupted across the colony despite exhaustion, grief, and disbelief. Citizens filled streets and shelters. Strangers embraced. Families reunited. For the first time in weeks, hope no longer felt fragile. Hours later, relief fleets from neighboring systems finally arrived. They found a saved world and countless questions. The largest question concerned the humans. Why had they come? The answer arrived through a final transmission from the battered warship before it prepared to depart. The captain's voice remained calm. Distance doesn't matter. Species doesn't matter. If a distress call reaches humanity, we answer. We always answer. No speeches followed. No demands for gratitude. No requests for recognition. The transmission ended. The wounded warship turned toward the void and disappeared into the darkness from which it had come. Long after it was gone, the people of Vera Prime remembered that day. Not because a powerful ship saved them, but because when the rest of the galaxy heard their cries and stayed silent, humanity heard them and came running.